Formula One Philosophy is back for episode 7. Today, we're talking about Melbourne. Melbourne, Australia. A lovely place filled with crazy people. I would know because I lived there for 6 months. Do I wish to go back? No, I prefer the northeastern part of Australia. The cowboys, the hillbillies, like me. Everybody's a bunch of farmers. They're drunk, but they're very smart, unlike me. Hi,
when
Sean.
When were you a farmer?
I was briefly a farmer in Australia. Did I ever tell you that?
You told me that, but you made it sound like you're a man of the farms. We grew up in the same place.
Yeah, we grew up in the suburbs. I'm very much not a strong man, as some would say. But you know what? I did hold off and stay there for 30 full days. Worst 30 days of my life. And then I got up and traveled the rest of Australia like a wanderlust douchebag.
Did you find yourself, Nick?
Oh, I found myself in a lot of beer. There's an excellent beer in Australia. And sorry, I know we're getting a little off topic, obviously, but there's an excellent beer in Australia. Maybe I should ask them to sponsor the podcast too. Stone and Wood, the Pacific Ale. I don't know if you've ever come across that in your travels.
I haven't. That's the first I'm hearing about it.
It's basically like a light IPA. I think it's 5%, but it has like a banana. It was like brewed in banana, and it's so tasty. It's one of the best beers in the world. We don't get it in Canada, and it's unfortunate. No. Anyways, another episode of Formula One Philosophy. With us, as always, is our crazy and very smart producer, Gatsby. You have anything to say?
And yes, I am very much mistaken.
We know, Gatsby. We know you're not really there. You're not fully there.
All I can tell you at the moment.
Gatsby, what'd I say about interrupting me?
Anything can happen in Formula One, and it usually does.
You just redeemed yourself, Gatsby. Good job. Sean, how was your week?
That was okay. I ended up in Michigan.
Oh, boy.
That was, let's say, quite boring and uneventful. But I got to get in a little dig at GM while I was down there, so that made my day a bit.
Do you want to tell everybody that story?
Sure. I guess for some context, when I started in automotive, it was a thing that if you were going to certain companies, the etiquette was that you should rent one of their cars. And there was a time at General Motors and Chrysler, at least, where if you showed up in a car that wasn't one of theirs, you had to park in a different parking lot. That's actually how petty they were, and the parking lots there are massive. So you were walking football fields worth of parking lots if you decided to rent something other than their car.
Jesus Christ.
So I went to the rental company, and I asked for a General Motors product, and the well-meaning woman behind the desk said, "Oh, we don't have any of that particular make or model, but I do have a Dodge Charger." Ugh. I mean, it's American.
Yeah, but it's a Dodge Charger.
Right. And it's not a good car.
No.
But what it is loud, fast, rear-wheel drive, and fast in the sense that it just goes, you put your foot down and the speed increases. Nothing else is worth redeeming it. You know, anything above 120 and all illusion of grip just disappears.
Oh, my God.
It's a terrible car, but it's big, it's loud, it does the job. It made driving to Detroit a little more enjoyable. I would have preferred to have the 370Z down there, but, you know.
Yeah, I thought we would get into these conversations later. After years, because I tried to hold this in to myself. But the pettiness, like you said it so well, the pettiness amongst Dodge owners versus Ford owners versus GM owners, it's so ridiculous at times. It's not just the companies. If you talk to, I know ever since I got my Toyota Tacoma truck, that there's people who would come, different types of people come every single time and go, "Oh, she got a Ram. That Ram has the best towing capacity, the best this, the best that." And I know I know that the Ram is a piece of shit, if you ask me, but like terrible fuel economy. It's okay to drive. It doesn't feel good. But yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, keep ranting. The Dodge Ram is a giant piece of shit.
It's a big piece of shit, but the Ram owners absolutely love it. And then same with Ford owners, and Ford owners like have to sit there and just like shit all over GM owners, and GM owners see someone with a Ford, and I've met so many of them that go, oh, you shouldn't have bought a Ford, it's so unreliable. And I just look at them and go, I guess you've never driven your car, your GM. It must have 0 kilometers on there, because GM is way more unreliable, worse to drive, made of plastic 90% of the time. Like at least Ford kind of tries.
No, they don't. So my cousin has driven a Ram for the longest time. That's all he buys, basically, to the point where his wife drives a Jeep. Like, he's just Chrysler through and through, and I'm not even sure that he knows why.
Yeah, exactly.
We were having the same conversation because my brother drives Chevy.
Yep.
And he goes, oh, but what do you mean? The Dodge Ram's been fine for me. I'm like, well, how many kilometers do you have on it? He goes, oh, it's like 170,000 kilometers. I go, okay, how much have you put into it? He's like, oh, nothing, just regular services, and I replaced the power steering pump twice. 170,000 kilometers, you replaced the power steering pump twice?
Twice. Not once. Twice. Oh, my God.
You shouldn't have to replace a power steering pump.
Yeah.
And my brother just got a brand new truck because his 2018 GMC Sierra dropped a lifter, which damaged the camshaft, which then resulted in 10 grand worth of repairs.
Oh, my God.
On a 2018 with 180,000 kilometers.
And when did this happen?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Okay, so that's about 6 years old, that truck.
With less than 200,000 kilometers.
Less than 200,000 kilometers. It's probably worth way less than 10,000. That's how badly they depreciate. And like GM owners just
those trucks actually, they hold their value pretty well. He ended up getting, I think, 12 grand in trade-in value for it.
Oh, wow.
But it should have been closer to 20.
That's true, yeah. Like the Tacoma, I know for a fact, like does not depreciate. It's the third best car for depreciation. The first two are Porsches. So I'm pretty happy with Tacoma. I'm not sitting here like worshiping Toyota. I'm not only going to buy Toyota the rest of my life. Although, really liking the new Land Cruiser the way it looks. Kind of want your opinion on that. What do you think?
I haven't put too much time into looking at it, but from what I've seen, it looks okay. It's basically the same platform as the Highlander Plus,
or the 4Runner, I thought.
No, it's a global platform, so there's a few cars that run on it. But there's the normal Highlander, and then now they've got a larger version. I forget what they call it, but that is, I believe, the same platform as the Land Cruiser and the Sequoia.
Yes. And we're unfortunate here in Canada. We don't get a lot of the good Toyota stuff. Like, speaking of, since we're coming back to Australia's been like gung-ho on the Land Cruiser. And when I was there on the farm, there was a 1985 one that was still going. So older than us, still going on that farm. Yes, it was kind of hanging on by a thread, and they had like an external battery for the ignition, because the ignition wouldn't start. But still, like, the thing was running as if it was brand new, especially the transmission. Like, it was a standard. No problems with first to third gear, which is pretty impressive to me.
What about the rest of the gears?
Well, we don't really use those gears on the farm, but but hey, all you need is 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I had somebody try to tell me that I was complaining. I used to have a Volkswagen, and the water pump blew up on me at 130,000 kilometers. It then blew up a second time at 140 something or 150 something thousand kilometers. And I was complaining that water pumps shouldn't do that. I've worked with water pumps. I've designed water pumps in the past. These are things that I know about. It shouldn't do that. And they went, oh, well, 130,000 is not bad. The car doesn't have a lot more life. What the fuck do you mean? My Mitsubishi Lancer, if I hadn't got cut off in traffic and ended up writing it off, would still be running.
Oh, yeah.
When that happened, it had 230,000 kilometers on it.
Holy shit.
You know what I replaced on that car?
What? Brakes. Yeah. Okay.
Once.
You didn't have to fix the transmission, anything like that?
Transmission was original. Clutch was original.
Wow.
I replaced an HVAC blower motor, which they blamed on me because the cabin air filter was dirty. And I told them, no, this is bullshit. This motor powers the defrost. If defrost doesn't work, that's a safety problem. This is a recall-worthy problem. No, sorry, it's because you didn't change your cabin air filter, so that all the dust got into the bearings and blew the motor. So fine, I paid the $400.
That's nothing.
Probably about 8 months later, recall notice shows up in the mail, HVAC blower motor.
Yeah. You knew that car better than them. That's why I ask you whenever I'm buying a car. I'm like, what do you think of this? Anyways, what year was that when they said that? Because I remember you telling me Mitsubishi was like on the verge of bankruptcy like 10 times in 10 years.
Yeah, they're always struggling for money, but that was mine was a 2010. That was probably 2015.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the auto industry was going through a recession at that point in time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
2014, 2016 era, yeah.
Well, 2008.
Yeah.
And they didn't recover until about 2014, really.
This is a philosophy podcast. We could go into it. Like I believe so much of my beliefs center around 2008 not being properly corrected. When they bailed out the banks and they killed capitalism to save capitalism. Remember that whole meme? Back in the day, you and I were like in second or third year university at that point in time. And I remember seeing that, and even I, like, you remember me back in those days, a diehard wannabe Republican, heard George Bush say that and go, you're a fucking moron. And that definitely turned me for a few years, because you don't kill capitalism to save capitalism. But that's been the meme, I think, of a lot of things for the past 10 years. Destroy it to save it. And you just end up just treading water for many years. But anyway, that's a whole big discussion. Maybe we'll have a podcast one day on actual philosophy.
Sure.
Yeah. And we can maybe take both sides of the argument, which we naturally do anyways. Like, one of us says one thing, the other person says the exact opposite. That's why I like our conversations. Because, like, even if we agree or disagree, we will take the opposite stand just to think about it. Like true philosophers. Thus F1 philosophy. It's like I just made that up at the top of my head. Anyways.
So
today we're talking about Melbourne. We're also going to talk a little bit about the juniors. I just want to mention Formula One Philosophy, or F1 Philosophy, at Instagram, F1 Philosophy at YouTube. We're going to start posting all of our videos there, and you'll start seeing more clips of us on YouTube. Please support us, like, subscribe, spread the news to everybody, tell everybody we exist. We already have 1 million followers. We want 2 million followers by
next week's episode.
Next week's episode. That's on you guys.
And we're going to do something special. You're going to get to see what Nick actually looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and compare with the picture, the thumbnail from one of the last therapist episodes. It is uncanny.
It's eerie. I see it and I think that's me. Like, that looks like a photo. Maybe I should just post that, like, along my wall in my house. Like, you know how, like, you have baby photos, like teenager photos. I'll just post that and see if anybody, like, blinks an eye. I'll just be like, what? Anyways, today, first off, we want to talk about the juniors. You're very passionate about the juniors, so I'm going to let you take the lead on that. What do you think about the junior program?
I think it's turned into a bit of a shit show. I think previously it wasn't as structured as it is today. Obviously, you hear about a lot of the greats coming up in different ways, right? Like Kimi Räikkönen went from karting to F1 essentially straight away. He had done some car racing here and there, but nothing really firm or sanctioned. Same with Martin Brundle. Mm-hmm. Martin Brundle was basically racing with his dad and his uncle in regional stuff around the UK, and found a drive. I forget what the exact story is, but found a drive. And it's impressive when stuff like that happens. Yeah,
you remember from the Schumacher documentary, he would have been fine just racing his dad's karts at his restaurant. his whole life. He even says that, like, and the next thing you know, he's in Formula 3, then Formula 1. Yeah. But
Right. And Formula 3 and GP2 and Formula 3000 and Formula Atlantics, these are all things that have been around for a long time, right? But it wasn't until relatively recently that it's all kind of consolidated under the FIA, and they've put dedicated steps to it, right, with the super license points and everything else. The super license has been around for a while, but the road to it is now a lot more controlled.
how many points do you need for a full super license in F1? Do you know off by heart?
I don't, not off the top of my head, but they have done some things in the recent past to make it, let's say, more difficult for people to get into F1. The latest one that I can think of was actually in a response to Max Verstappen, because he skipped F2, I believe, completely. He was the youngest. I believe he was the youngest entrant into an F1 race at 17.
Yep.
Youngest winner as well because of that. And they specifically created a rule, and I believe the nickname for it is the Max Verstappen rule.
Really?
Which essentially makes it harder for them to get the super license points. They have to go through Formula 2. If they don't go through Formula 2, it takes a hell of a lot longer to get those points. Like, you can get super license points in Indy, but the points awarded for IndyCar are nothing compared to F2.
Yeah, almost nothing. What is it? Scott Dixon, Colton Herta. Yeah, it doesn't matter how many races they win. It's basically useless. Yeah, but yeah, go on.
Yeah. And Colton Herta is a good example because he's always mentioned in the running for certain F1 seats, but they have to force him into rookie test days, like the FP1 sessions for rookies, right? They have to force him into there so he can get the buffer of super license points that he needs. And I think technically he's still short one or two.
Yeah, why doesn't he just go to F2 for that matter? But yeah, go on.
Well, you need money and endorsements for F2, and he makes more money racing IndyCar.
That's fair.
So in a way, I think that it's been a good thing where it's now a more consistent. You're not getting people who have a ton of money and can just buy their way in, per se. You at least have to go through the steps and get points.
Theoretically speaking, because I can think of a million off the top of my head, but yeah, go on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Logan Sargent being the primary one at the moment of, he's not really worth being there, but he had enough backing to get his way into enough sessions to get the points.
And Joe. Let's not forget him, yeah. But yeah, go on.
So now that the structure is clear and they've done things to make it a more tiered ladder, I think they need to go to another step, because this year in particular is relatively painful in the sense that there are no rookies.
Yeah.
Having rookies is good, right? It adds an unknown, it adds some excitement. Having the same people drive around who don't necessarily deserve to be there, like we talked about in one of the more recent episodes. You started naming a bunch of drivers, and do they deserve to stay there? No.
Half of them don't. No, you said it the other day. Throw the bottom half out at this point. You might as well put a bunch of rookies in, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I wouldn't mind if some of these people stayed. Like, for example, we've been talking about Bottas back to Mercedes as a potential.
Yeah.
That might be interesting. But if that doesn't happen, I wouldn't mind seeing him go to be replaced by somebody younger.
Yeah.
Right? I would hate, for example, if he didn't get a seat and they brought somebody older back, like if Kimi Räikkönen decided he wanted to race again.
Yeah.
That, to me, is a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to get rid of him, bring somebody new in.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I think part of this is, yes, it's a more tiered structure. Yes, they have a more consistent approach to, let's say, vetting the drivers, because F2, F3 are spec series cars, so everybody drives the same hardware. So you're technically comparing drivers, which is great.
Well, hold on. Do you have anything else to add? Because that's a whole big discussion right there. That, to me, is the crux of my problem with the juniors.
Yes,
But
and
yeah.
this, I'm not sure if we have the same idea, but I think there is a problem inherently in that.
Yes.
I think it's from a data standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. You take away the variable of the car, you can no longer say your favorite argument, he's not a good driver, he had a good car.
Mm-hmm. And I'll stand by that. Yeah, but go on.
So you take away the variable of the car, and you just have the driver.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at F2 this year so far, the 2 races that they've had, or the 4 races, sorry, the 2 sprints and the 2 features, we've seen who the standout drivers are. It's a new season with a new car that nobody is familiar with, that is closer to what the F1 cars are. And we've seen some standout drives.
Mm-hmm. I think you're going to say Zane Maloney.
Yes.
And I would say even the Fittipaldi. There's 55 Fittipaldis. I forget which one this is.
This is Enzo.
Enzo, okay, because Pietro is the one who's the Haas.
The Haas reserve, yeah.
Yeah, and then who's the one who was a champion?
Emerson.
Emerson, okay, there you go. But yeah.
Emerson is Enzo and Pietro's grandfather.
Oh, okay. And the dad never raced.
Not as far as I know.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, and I just want to say this, just so we can keep the topic going this way. It's great to have a spec series, I think, along the way. You're right. See who the good drivers are. You're right. However, Formula One is not fair. Formula One is not where you find out, like, necessarily the best driver. The best driver can be in a bad car sometimes and not be winning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for F2 to be a spec series, I think is part of the problem. Because I think that's where you start to learn and teach drivers how to develop and grow with teams. And I almost think it would be even better if F2 stopped being spec. F3 being spec makes a lot of sense. And that's where you learn, like you said, like Max Verstappen from F3, Michael Schumacher from F3, Lance Stroll, Esteban Ocon for a worse example. But you did see some standout drivers through F3 who made the jump. But F2 at that point should almost be like Formula 1B.
Yeah.
It would make more sense because, like, yes, Zane Maloney's crushing now in an equal car, but if he jumps to F1, he's not going to be in a really good car. Or he's not going to be equal to, say, the Red Bulls, Mercedes.
No.
Yeah,
and realistically, he's a Sauber Academy driver, so he's going to be in what is potentially the worst car on the grid.
Yeah, well, that's what I think, is they're going to be the worst car on the grid. But yeah, but go on.
I agree with that, and I think this may be, and it's going to sound weird for me to say this may be regulation gone too far.
Oh, wow.
There's merit in having it be a spec car, right? Because if you get into development and every team can do essentially what F1 does and design a car, then you get these multi-million-dollar, tens and hundreds of million-dollar companies working on these cars. And then you don't have an F1B, you have an F1 team, right? Like Rodin tried to get into F1. They were one of the teams that applied for a spot when they opened it up, and Andretti applied as well. Mm. So Rodin is a big name in F2 and has been for a long time. They applied to get an F1 team. So they have the money to do it if they wanted to, right? So I don't think they should be allowed to just spend all the money they have to develop a car that's going to be a world beater in F2.
That's a good point.
All right. Same with Prema. Prema is tied to Ferrari and has links everywhere else. They could get the money to build great cars. So I think there does need to be some regulation to say, okay, Dallara is going to build this chassis.
Okay.
But give them the ability, if they have good powertrain people, have Mechachrome say, here's an operating window for the engine. If you violate it, that's on you. You have to buy more engines. But do whatever you want within that operating range, and you should be good. That gives someone the opportunity to say, okay, well, if I play with this, I might get more power. I'm more likely to DNF,
Yeah.
but I might have a better car.
But that's what you learn in your first 2-3 years of F1 anyways. So yeah, you might as well, like you're saying, do that in F2.
Right.
Yeah.
And that gives the driver and the engineers the ability to say, oh, okay, so I've noticed this in these areas. If we can do this, maybe the turbo spools up faster, I'll have better drivability, or whatever the situation is. There's a ton of things you can do with powertrain that makes it better to drive. So give them freedom in areas like that. Give them freedom in areas that aren't money pits, let's say. Like, you're not going to say, okay, you can develop the floor, because the floor has a lot of potential on a ground effects car to give you tons of performance, but it also gets extremely expensive, right? So maybe give them areas like wing end plates. They used to call them monkey seats. I don't know what they call them anymore, but they're little winglets under the wing, kind of right where the exhaust is, to help force flow, direct flow away from the bottom of the car there.
Is this similar to what you were talking about last week with Mercedes and their 5 variations of the wing, or is this different?
Different.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But like little bits and pieces, right? Give them areas of the car that are open, and if they have the money and they want to try something, they can, right? And then that introduces an element of these teams know what they're doing, which then also develops engineers and junior team members to eventually move to F1, because F1 is hard to get into as it is. And it's one of these things where if you're not in F1, it almost feels impossible to get into it.
Yes.
Right.
But at the same time, too, the cars in F1 are getting a lot easier to drive. We saw with Oliver Bierman, and even Jordan said that. And I think it's at the lower end of Formula One where it's hard, as you're saying, to be in F1 if you're not in F1. But I think towards the top, if the drivers were to jump to the top teams, they'd find it a lot easier.
Yeah, that comment was specifically about non-drivers. So if you're a mechanic or you're an engineer, or you're someone who wants to get to F1, but you're currently working for Rodin or Prema or whoever.
I see. Okay.
You get to put on your CV that, I was with Rodin when we were drastically dominant because of this diffuser that I designed, or this monkey wing that I designed, right? Whereas if it's just a spec series, the engineers don't have much to brag about.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much they can do, and everybody has the same thing, right? And it's the same for the drivers. You can't really brag if your average finishing position is 4th and your finishes range from 1st to 14th, right? You're just an average driver.
Yes.
In order to be a standout driver in this case, you have to have an average finishing place of 2nd with a finish position of 1 to 4, right? And that's not happening. We're not seeing that. Well, I mean, based on 4 races, we have seen that, but not from the people that we thought we were going to see it from.
Yeah, we didn't see it from Antonelli. We didn't see it from Berman per se. Yeah, go on.
Right? And that's just it. The people that were touted and really excitable at the beginning of this season, and yeah, we're just 2 weekends in, but it's not that Antonelli didn't win. It's not that Behrman didn't win. They were terrible.
I want to give Antonelli a season, though. I've said this to you already.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not putting the kid down. I'm just saying, the talk about him going to Mercedes, based on these first 2 weekends,
way too premature.
there's no fucking way.
No, but this is you said it at the beginning of your discussion. It's the hype, or it's the talk, or it's essentially like the vetting process, which you're absolutely right. They vet the drivers that they want, and this has always been. I've talked about this in a million different therapy episodes already. Journalists almost seem like they want the mediocre ones, and even some team principals. They want the mediocre ones because they know they won't rock the boat. They'll just drive the cars that they want, that the engineers want to drive. And you see, I know you, and I know how you think, so I know it's not all engineers thinking this way. I don't even think it's even one engineer thinking this way, because I know you're all too smart to think that way. It's I think the meme comes from the top almost, and the discussion comes from the top, and they say, okay, well, this is the guy we want. And it doesn't matter what the actual results are. It's have they been vetted to be a marketable Formula One driver?
Yep.
And that's my issue with F2 is that the vetting process should have been done in F3.
Yeah.
And F2 should almost be like, it should be another type of Formula One. And I think to bring up to your point, like, okay, give them leeway on certain aspects of the wings, or not the floor, or maybe this parts of the engine. What they could even do too is have like old style Formula One. Here's 5 different manufacturers for, say, engines or chassis. And it's up to the drivers and the teams to choose what they want for this year of each aspect of their car. And in that way, you could even have 20 different cars in F2, 20 different styles of cars in F2, and them trying to figure out what is the best way to go forward. And maybe give them one window throughout the year if they want to make any changes.
Yeah, and that's actually that's something I hadn't considered. It's actually not a bad idea, because Dallara is the biggest name. They make cars for everything, but they're not the only ones.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at Le Mans and their cross section of cars. There are a lot of manufacturers that make LMP cars that could very easily make an F2 chassis.
Porsche, BMW.
Not even them. The name that comes to my mind is Glickenhaus, but they're pretty niche. They're a privately owned company that did LMP and hypercars. But Radical, for example, Radical makes LMP cars. They make an LMP car for the street, essentially, but they could do the exact same thing. There's a whole host of these companies out there. I want to say Targus is one that makes F4 cars. They could do the same thing, so you're not wrong. Have Mechachrome, have Mercedes, VW, BMW make F2 engines, because the F2 engine is just a 3.5 liter V6 turbo. There are plenty of companies that make that right now. Nissan, in my opinion, makes one of the best ones.
Really? I would not expect that. Aren't they trying? I guess they are in F1. Sorry, that's a stupid comment by me. Yeah.
It's Renault.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't attach Nissan to that. That's disrespectful.
My mistake. Yeah, after this year, yeah, my mistake.
But anybody, it's not the overly complex engine that F1 is. A 3.5 liter V6 is a perfectly sized V6 engine. You put a turbo on it, you package it a little nicer, you do the exhaust work. Anybody can make it. So I think you're onto something. Get, let's say, 2 or 3. I wouldn't go more than 3 chassis manufacturers or engine manufacturers, and let them mix and match.
Yeah.
And make it a kit so that they all fit with each other. There's no, you picked a Targus chassis so you can't use a BMW engine. No.
Yeah.
Make it so that they all piece together nicely. And then let the teams have some adjustability and let the drivers have some feedback, so that if Antonelli this year, for example, races a Targus chassis and a BMW engine and hates it, he can switch to a VW engine next year, and maybe that has characteristics, and he starts to piece that together and become a more rounded development driver, right?
Or even mid-season. Give like one window, like I'm saying. And it also encourages them to get into the car more and to feel things out and to do more laps, practice more, be more serious every time they're out on the track. And lo and behold, whose early life, I know this is an extreme example, but whose early life was exactly that, figuring out little things, having it adjusted without him knowing and trying to figure it out. And it's Max Verstappen. And yeah, Jos may have done that deliberately to kill him. We will never know the truth to that. But it was still the right thing to do if you want to teach your son about every aspect of the car. And that's what F2 should be about. Ralph Schumacher said this on his interview in Formula for Success. He said, in my day, the cars were very hard to drive. So you had to learn. You had to learn how to be a good driver. Now, Ralph's not the best example for what a good driver is, but still, compared to a lot of the drivers today, he's light years ahead of them. And also actually solves another thing from Formula Success I was listening to, in the sense that Jordan was like, okay, if all these manufacturers failed and they don't see a point in coming back into F1, or they maybe even can't get back into F1. If F2 was Formula 1B, why not start there and see how you do? See if you can maybe one day work your way up, like you said, have more engineers working their way up into Formula 1, into the Formula 1 paddocks, or even have entire teams just jump because they think they're ready. Mm-hmm. You know, it solves both problems right there.
Which I think nicely segues into what I've been throwing around in my head for a long time is the problem with rookies in these spec series is that you have no consistent metric to see, okay, when they get to the big show, are they going to be any good? Because FP1, yeah, okay, they're in the hardware, they're doing the laps, but it's not the same.
No.
There's no pressure on them to perform because they're not in competitive sessions, right? They're usually engine turned down. It's usually go out there, put an aero rake on, run this program. And if you don't know what an aero rake does,
No.
it's a bunch of tubes that measure airspeed and pressure.
Oh, is that the one that like sits on top of the car?
Yeah,
You saw in
it looks
testing?
like a
Okay.
big satellite on the back of it. So they bolt those on, and the idea with an aero rake is you go around at a fixed speed. So they'll say, okay, go around at, I don't know, 140 kilometers an hour. And you do a lap, you get up to speed, you hit 140, and you just kind of go through the course at a constant speed. And what that tells them is how the air flows around the body, right? So it's a lot of development work, and it's great for the young drivers to have that because it lets them know what feedback and what strategies and protocols are in place once they get to the big show. Fine. And occasionally, yeah, you'll see them, they'll throw a set of tires on, they'll go for a run, but it's never really that competitive.
No,
Right.
and like I remember this with Bierman. They said, oh, he's only 0.2 off of Hulkenberg and Magnussen in testing. It's like, okay, well, A, are Hulkenberg and Magnussen really pushing it? Or are they like Max Verstappen learning about tire degradation throughout the weekend and taking the car a little bit easier?
Right.
Yeah.
So, where I'm thinking with this is we've got now the longest season in history, 24 races, to the point where teams are talking about having multiple teams of people. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and we've seen it in previous seasons where we were at 20, 21, 22 races where the team principals wouldn't show up to every race. And their reasoning was, it's a long fucking season.
Yeah, I'm fucking tired.
I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
How do you think everybody else feels?
Yeah.
Right? You have your dedicated people like GP, Max's engineer. He's got to be there every weekend. You've got the key members of the pit crew and everything else that got to show up every weekend. Now they're talking about 24 races. That's half a year. It's over half a year.
Yeah, this started, basically end of February. Is not going to end till December 8th.
Right.
That's almost 11 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's 24 weeks, which is less than half a year. But you're right. There's travel in between and everything else and setup. And it's a lot of work for these guys.
They're
right?
not dilly-dallying. They're transporting cars across the ocean in those 2 weeks. That's the only reason why there is 2 weeks in between half the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are duplicate pieces of equipment that go to some of these races to catch up for that. But you're not wrong. These people are working all out all the time. So now they're talking about, well, we have to get second teams in to give these guys some downtime in between this, in the season. And that got me thinking, what about the drivers?
Yeah, that's a good point.
These guys travel just as much. Now, you can argue that they're not working as hard in between sessions. They don't have to set up the car. They don't have to set up the pit in the garage and this and that and whatever.
They're keeping in shape, though. It's hard.
They keep in shape. They do all the press duty. They do everything else. They have to travel, right?
Yeah.
They got 2 weeks to go from Saudi Arabia to Australia. That's great. But I think I might be wrong on this, but I believe we go into Europe and then into Canada, back to Europe. I know that's correct, but I think we don't have a large gap between that.
Well, I think they do Japan after that. Japan, China after Australia.
Yes, but I'm talking about the European season starts.
In San Marino, you're right, yeah.
And then it goes to Canada.
Yes.
And then it goes back to Europe. And I don't believe there's a 2-week window in there.
I have to check up on
There
that.
might be a 2-week window on one side of it, but I think we're close. And that's not a short distance. That's
No.
an 8-hour flight,
No.
right? So what about the drivers? And this got me thinking, why don't why doesn't the FIA impose a mandatory 2-race break for the drivers?
And force your reserve, not reserve, what's the word I'm thinking of? Your juniors.
A junior or a reserve, who is usually a junior anyway, to sit in.
That's a good idea.
Give them super license points to do that. Say, okay, you have to have a minimum number of super license points to be eligible for one of those days. And you get additional super license points to hit your maximum, right? And that forces the teams to say, okay, maybe we won't be so competitive in Baku. So let's put Behrman in the car in Baku.
Yeah. That could also work strategically too. Like, I guess Mercedes thinks they have well, you just basically said that, but yeah, like the smaller teams think, okay, we can't win X number of Grand Prix, but we may have a chance. Like Williams, let's put our reserve drivers for, I don't know, what's a bad track for them? Japan, right? But we'll save Albon for Monza.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Or maybe you go the other way. You go, okay, Monza, we're highly likely to score points, aka De Vries.
Ah, yeah. Okay, that's
So
a good.
put the rookie in. He's going to go fast down the straight. No one will be able to get ahead of him. And then we put Albon in for Singapore, where there's no fucking way we're going to be competitive, but he's the guy that will score a point if we can.
More than likely. Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah.
That introduces an element of strategy. It introduces an element of complexity, because now you've got to figure out who's doing what when. And the excitement is there because you get to see what the young guys can do, right? We saw it with Fittipaldi when Grosjean was out after his accident. He had to stand in for the last 2 races. He was terrible,
Yeah.
but he got his shot. I don't think we'll ever see him again because of the performance he had, but
If he didn't get a seat the time that Mick Schumacher and Mazepin took it, that was basically hopeless for him. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's got a promising career in Le Mans, so he's not too butthurt about it. But I think that is probably the best thing we can do for these juniors, because one, it gets them out of the F2 cars into F1 hardware. It gives them competitive metrics to say, okay, they put Robert Schwartzman in Baku and they put Ollie Behrman in Singapore.
In your idea, just to clarify, has to be 2 different drivers, juniors, every year.
No, not necessarily.
It could just be one. Okay.
It could just be one. So Aston Martin could decide that they're going to put Felipe Drugovich in
for 2 races.
for 2 races. Or you could say 2 races per driver, which then gives them 4 opportunities to be on the grid.
Would the teams want to do that's my only thought. Is I like your idea. The only thought is, okay, let's say there's a Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen title fight again.
Too bad.
Too bad.
Because Max has to be out of the car twice as well.
Could it be in a sense that there's 2 races set aside for everybody? It's not just you choose them. Like maybe that would make more sense. Okay, for these 2 races is just juniors only.
Well, that brings me to another part of it. You and I have talked about this before. There are certain tracks that we want to keep because of the nostalgia of it, but I think are absolutely pointless.
Amazing. I can't believe we got here. I'm not joking, everybody. We got here at the same idea completely separately without talking to each other about it. That's amazing. Sorry. Yeah, I know what you're going to say. Go.
Monaco is an absolutely useless track to race on. With these cars being as large as they are, it is no longer relevant. And I get that a lot of people are going to disagree with me and say that I'm a heretic. We shouldn't be racing there.
It's not the days of Senna and Schumacher anymore, everybody. Unfortunately, it isn't. So, yeah, we remember the days.
Have you seen the comparison of the size of the cars?
It's night and day. I know.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Those cars have no business being on that road. And for those of you that haven't, these cars are larger than most family-sized sedans. They are absolutely huge. So why are we racing there? If you want to go to Monaco, you should be able to. And we should have that weekend on the calendar. But it should become a specialist event where you decide what you race, how you race it, who you race, make it a one-off. Like, I'm not sure if they still do it, but F2 or GP2 used to go to Macau and Macau was not part of the European calendar. It was a standalone event. So when you look at a lot of the junior series, you see a history of races in Macau, and this person won the Macau Grand Prix 5 times.
Yeah, but it doesn't do anything for their points or their F2 results. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So make Monaco like that.
Yeah.
Make it so that if Haas wants to race whoever, if they want to bring Ralph Schumacher out of retirement.
Mick Schumacher back at Monaco is exactly what they want. Yeah.
Right? Bring his uncle. His uncle talked a lot of smack about Gene Haas. Put him in the car, see if he can do better than Mick. Right?
With that Haas, with that crappy Haas, maybe. And anyways, yeah, go on.
But this goes on to the next thing, too, of why does it have to be the same car?
So almost like Le Mans, where like there's different types of cars
Well,
driving.
Le Mans has become more regimented now. I know what you're thinking of, like the fact that they have different classes on the same track. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But for example, if you had a world beater car that is no longer a world beater, like Mercedes, for example, bring the W18 out and put Mick Schumacher in it and let him race against Max Verstappen in the RB20.
That'd be interesting.
Who wins? I don't know. It'd probably be a close competition
Yeah.
around Monaco, right? Make that something and make it so that you can run juniors, you can run your normal drivers. It doesn't count towards the constructors or the drivers' championship points, but give them a separate set of points.
I think they would go for that more than they would go for forcing the championship to have two junior drivers, because like I said, someone would think about the title fight thing, and then all the 10 teams would strike it down.
But it shouldn't matter because everybody has to spend time out of the car. You can't say, okay, Sergio's going to take 4 races off and Max is going to stay there. No,
It has to be 2 and 2.
you force 2 people out.
Yeah.
And in a season where Max has a potential to win 24 races, take 2 away from him, it's going to make a dent. He'll still win.
He'll win the other 22 out of spite.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, so we didn't have the exact same idea, but my idea was in the sense I brought up Formula 1B. And you save these tracks by, if you have the second division of Formula 1 being another Formula 1, if F1 wants to go to Thailand one year and there's no room for Spa, that's egregious. However, you want to bring the market to Thailand, give it to the B League. Give Spa to the B League that year. And it's part of the Formula 1 universe. And it stays in the Formula 1 universe. It's just not the A League that year. You know?
Interesting. So it almost becomes like a heritage series.
Yeah, I was actually even thinking more along the lines of like promotion and relegation in soccer. What you see in the sense that like it helps develop drivers so that maybe the winner of the B League, who's familiar with all the old tracks, like if for some reason we lose Imola one year and it's in the B League and someone wins Imola, Spa in F2, or they win Monaco, they can easily make the jump to F1 in a sense because they have a familiarity with these types of tracks. Someone would look at that and say, you know what? That's someone who could translate to F1. I don't think you could ever talk them into direct promotion and relegation. Like if you said, okay, the 10th place constructor is out of Formula 1, is down to the B League, I don't think they'll ever go for that. But it would be really cool. We won't have a team like Haas or Williams just sit there languishing at the back. They'd be forced to make some moves.
That is a very strong motivator.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting theory, or it's an interesting idea. My question would be, what kind of car are you using?
In the B League?
Because you're not going to use the same car that costs you as much as it does now to run a B League.
Well, yeah, I would say the original idea we had where you piece together a team based on 5 different chassis, 5 different ground effects. But that's a good point. If you're going to spend all that money in Formula 1 and then you're going down to the B League the next year, it's not an investment a lot of teams want to take.
Unless you say, okay, the 10th team goes to the B League. the F2 teams have an opportunity to come up. So the teams that can, for example, pay to develop a car can develop an F1 level car. They're unproven. So you go to B League with the chance that you could move into A. You could take the 10th place team.
Yes.
So you have Roden, you have Prema, you have Van Amersfoort Racing.
Trident, yeah.
Yeah, Trident. Let's say they all say, okay, we have the money, we're going to develop an F1 car. Andretti.
Yeah.
We're going to develop an F1 car. We go to the B team. We race Monaco. We race Spa, Fuji, whatever races they decide.
What have they kicked out? Like Luxembourg, like that's easily a B. Like Luxembourg, Argentina.
Well, they've still got to be relevant FIA level 1 tracks.
I'm pretty sure like Argentina is close, yeah? Or no?
The standards have changed, so you'd have to see. Like, it took a lot to get Zandvoort up to speed.
Wow. I don't like Zandvoort. Anyways, go on, yeah.
But you say, okay, you're an unproven entity. You want to build an F1 car, build one. You're going to race F1B. We're going to do 5-10 races a year. And the 10th place team from F1 gets relegated back. The first place team from F1B gets promoted to F1. And sorry, Haas, if you can't hack it, you're going down. So pick it up.
And if you can't hack it in the B League, you're not going back.
Right.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. That's actually not a bad idea. Because it gives them... It keeps the pressure on the development. And it keeps them from having to develop a secondary car. And it allows them to develop... So in the B League, presumably it's the same regulations. It's the same cost cap. It's the same everything.
Yeah. Same
And
guidelines.
you would say the idea is develop a better car so you can get back into F1A.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad idea. It'll never happen because these
absolutely
teams are
not.
so fucked.
Yeah. The world we live in now is all about closed shop. It's all about protecting previous or generational wealth. It's about closing the door that was open for hundreds of years before. So we're screwed in a lot of industries. I'm just saying this is a great idea. Yeah.
What it is, F1 has always been the old boys club.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is now the new money has come in and they've started shitting their pants because new money has a lot of power. So they've started closing it down to maintain the old boys club, and this is what you get.
But and you should have never let them in, metaphorically speaking, the camel into the tent. I will leave that at that. But yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's with a lot of things. That's in a lot of industries. Anyways, just for the record, you were I think partially right. Yeah, it's Japan, China, and then Miami, Imola, Monaco. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah, it's kind of weird. This and then back to Canada, and then Spain, Austria.
Right. And what's the gap between Monaco and Canada?
You're right. I think it's a week. Hold on. May 26th to June. No, actually, it's 2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks, but then from Canada to
Spain is another 2, but then Austria is. It's then Austria and then Britain in a row. Spain, Austria, Britain in a row, which is ridiculous.
Which, it's all Europe, and Europe is tiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's 16 hours to drive from Barcelona to Frankfurt.
And then another how many hours to Spielberg?
I'm going to say at least another 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah, because sometimes you can only take those routes. You can't go. There's not. Yeah, because the mountains. You can't go straight Spain to.
I've never driven to Austria, but I've driven from southern Germany to Czech Republic, and there's one highway that you can take.
Yeah.
So Europe is small, absolutely, but you're not going to fly parts from Spain to Austria. You're going to drive them.
Mm-hmm. And then Austria to Britain.
Yeah, that's even longer.
And then way longer, yeah. And then Hungary to Belgium. Yeah, I know that for a fact. Yeah, the train, the speed train from Munich to Budapest is I think 8 hours. I'm pretty positive.
Yes.
Or maybe less than that. But yeah.
So they go from the UK to Hungary
In 2 weeks. And then,
Okay.
but then a week Hungary to Belgium Belgium's basically is just an ocean away from
When is the summer break?
after Belgium.
Oh, okay, so they moved Spa to before now.
Yeah. And then Holland is the Dutch Grand Prix is the
Yeah.
25th.
So that is a stretch because Belgium is up there
Mm-hmm.
and Hungary is southeast.
Yeah. That's a drive in a week.
Yeah, and I mean it's fine; they can do it, but it's to the point of it's a lot of work, right?
And
These
that's-
guys are constantly on the move.
And that's already race 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's already race 13. Like you said, they're already exhausted at this point.
Yes.
There used to be 16 races in a season.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're used to.
So I mentioned it briefly before, but they have duplicate sets of hardware. But for example, they're going to unpack in Hungary. They're going to unpack. They're going to pack everything up after the race in Hungary. It's going to go onto trucks, and those trucks are going to start driving the day after to Spa because they have 3 days.
Yeah, you're right.
They
Yeah.
have to be set up and ready on the Wednesday.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Because media day is Thursday, right?
Yeah, so there is no rest for these guys.
No,
They
Jesus.
pack up, the trucks go. If you're lucky, they might put you on a plane from Hungary to Spa on the Wednesday morning, a Ryanair flight or something like that.
If you're lucky, yeah.
If you're not lucky, they're packing you in the back of the fucking truck with the, the rest of the gear.
Jordan said he did that his first win in '98. He said the night before, he's just like, I don't have the money to fly you guys. Hop on the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I think he said 16-hour bus ride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Europe is famous for having these, or at least Germany, hop on, hop off. So you pay a ticket for the bus. It's more than a normal ticket. But the hop on, hop off part is you get on wherever you want, you get off wherever you want, you don't pay extra, right?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But the joke being that that is something that Jordan would have done at those times. Here's a fucking hop on, hop off, get off in Spa.
Fucking Jordan. Anyways, I think we hashed out the juniors a little bit. We're already an hour in.
Yeah.
So I think we should stop it there, and then we can save the rest for another time. We had some good ideas there. I think we had some very original ideas. That's what I love about this podcast. We're saying the things nobody...
Super.
Gatsby.
Thanks, Gatsby.
I was talking, Gatsby. Don't make me beat you like I do off camera.
Absolutely furious!
Okay, well, that was funny, Gatsby. Good job. Stupid dog. Anyways, it is now race 3 already, if you can believe it. Melbourne, Australia. I think it's pretty safe to say what our predictions are going to be in terms of who wins. But I spent all day watching the highlights from last year. What a fucking clusterfuck that race was, and it had nothing to do with Melbourne. Everything to do with the FIA. I forgot that there was 2 red flags in last year's race.
Yep.
And both were completely unnecessary.
Yeah. Since Charlie Whiting died, the stewardship, the race control, everything about it has been a complete clusterfuck.
Mm.
Charlie, I want to say Charlie's the last person from the Bernie era.
Mm.
He's not a Bernie type person.
Nobody is.
He was well respected, well loved in the paddock, and he always did things with the drivers and safety in general in mind. And he basically wrote the book on stewarding. So when he died, there was very clearly a vacuum.
Filled greatly by Michael Massey.
He did nothing wrong.
I'm kidding.
I will go to the grave. That is a hill I'm willing to die on. He did nothing wrong.
Oh, I completely agree with you on that. I think, and if anything, Formula One set the groundwork many years before Massey made that decision for fuckery like that. But anyways, you're right. Technically, he did nothing wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, go on. Sorry. Charlie Whiting there was a void needed to be filled.
Yeah, and they've tried a couple of different things, and I think Liberty buying F1 and Charlie dying couldn't have happened at the worst possible time. There was some sort of succession plan in place for Charlie, because obviously he was getting up there, he was about to retire. But him dying in Australia on a race weekend was problematic for F1.
When was this, by the way? I don't remember this.
I want to say it was 2018.
No. Right. Okay.
First race of the season, 2018, right? And I believe Michael Massey was the second in command. That's why he got the job. And from what I saw, he was doing it the way it should have been done. But, 2018 happened and he no longer had a job, and then they tried to backfill that position, and it just became a clusterfuck of track limits and penalties that didn't make sense, and let them fight, but when they fight, that should have been a penalty, and, it hasn't been the same since.
It's a parent who tries to appease both kids. There was no law.
Yes.
There was no law and order, and that's what I saw between. I 2021 made me hate Wolf and Horner a lot because of the babyish attitude that they had, and Verstappen too, and Hamilton at times. It's just no one ever sat them down and said, "Shut the fuck up. These are the rules. We're going to enforce them. Shut up."
I would argue that by saying Massey did that.
I on the last race to Total Wolf, yeah.
But that line is fantastic.
It's a racing league, yeah. That was.
It's a race, Toto. We went motor racing,
Mm-hmm.
and that is exactly what happened. It's not so much that Massey was trying to appease everybody; it's the FIA and F1 in general was trying to appease everybody, and then kowtowed to Toto and fired the guy that was trying to do his fucking job properly.
That was the peace offering. Because, like I've told you on this podcast before, a million times before, they just wanted an amazing title fight. The season should have been over. The title should have been over around Brazil or Qatar. But then suddenly Mercedes is a second faster after an engine change. And I think Horner alluded to it. I was thinking about this today, which is funny enough that you brought this, we got to this point. Horner alluded to it. And he said, "Why are they so much faster?" And then went quiet. And I think it was the FIA saying, "Listen, when the time comes, you're going to win. But in the meantime, let's have a title fight."
I don't. So Horner saying, "Why are they so much faster?" is a very Bernie Ecclestone move. He knows why they were faster, and they're perfectly within their rights to be faster.
A second faster, though?
Absolutely.
Ferrari got burnt for 3 years for being 3/10 faster.
Because they were doing something wrong.
I imagine Mercedes was doing something bad, too.
No. So, you're not allowed to develop engines. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's for reliability.
Oh, right.
And
We
we've
talked
about this.
Yes.
So, come Brazil, you don't have a whole lot of races left. If you put a new engine in because your previous one blew up and you've already taken the penalty, and you go, "I've designed this engine to run for 6-7 races without blowing up, and I've only got 3 left. Let's crank the fucking power up."
Oh, okay.
I am fully within my rights to do that. I've done nothing wrong. I haven't fooled any sensors. I haven't cheated. I haven't developed anything. I've said, okay, there's a risk involved in increasing the power level. I've basically gone, there used to be all this talk about party mode. Right, they'd go into qualifying in party mode, which gave them more power. And the FIA said, okay, we're going to make it even for everybody to cater to Renault at that time. No more party modes. You lock your engine mode in. If you go too high on your performance in qualifying, that's what you're racing with. Right, so everybody dialed it back.
What year was this? Do you remember?
2016, 2017.
Okay, and so Renault was having problems with their engines then. Okay, anyway, go on, yeah.
So Mercedes looked at it and went, okay, we've been running at 70% power, and that gets us 7 races before an engine blows up.
Let's go 100 for 4. Okay.
go 100 for 4, go 90 for 4, go 90 for 3, whatever it is. But absolutely, they can get a second. Between upping the power and making upgrades to wings and things like that give you less drag, you can absolutely gain it. So Horner saying, how did they gain a second, did exactly what he wanted to by making people like you think they're cheating.
Because
But
I
they're not.
entertain every and any conspiracy theory in the world.
Yes.
And that's what I love about myself. Just like I was going to bring up the conspiracy theory that interestingly enough, the second in command, an Australian, and Charlie Whiting dies in Australia in 2018. You heard it here first, everybody. You heard it here first. Michael Massey, we're on to you. Sean's rubbing his eyes in his head. He's like, oh my God, I don't want to respond to this. I don't want to feed the beast. Let's move on.
Please.
Okay. So last year there was a lot of fuckery. I've said it before a million times too. You also saw a lot of people get momentum that didn't necessarily warrant it from last year. I'm looking at you, Hulkenberg, Zhou Guan Yu, even Oscar Piastri, Yuki Tsunoda, all got points. Wouldn't have necessarily been the case if not for that last couple lap fuckery. I only bring that up not to be an asshole again, even though I am. It's more to say that there was a lot of cars that DNF that race that may not do that this year. So I think our predictions in terms of where everybody's going to sit should warrant some of that. Because George Russell had an engine failure. I totally forgot about that. Mercedes, by the way, something we didn't talk about from last year, had a lot of reliability issues, uncharacteristically from 2023. And that's very, very weird for them, yeah.
Yeah, and Mercedes, the last 3 years, this year and the last 2, have been a complete shit show for Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
Their cars can't perform, and their reliability hasn't been great.
Well, the reliability has been trending down because I think they were still pretty reliable in 22. I think they had one DNF. Yeah, 2022 was more about performance, like they had performance issues, whereas 2023 was reliability. And I wonder if this year, we see a mix of both. But yeah, the only reason I brought that up was just say George Russell didn't finish the Grand Prix. So that top 10 was a little skewed. Also, Charles Leclerc spins out first lap. So you don't have him finish the Grand Prix. You have like the two Alpines go up and discombobulate. You also had McLaren was doing bad last year at this point in time. So I think you're just going to see a completely different top second to 10.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is motor racing. Charles Leclerc spun out first lap. These things happen.
Correct. Yes.
Right? He pushed too hard. He made a mistake. George Russell's engine failed. It's the man and machine, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Leclerc was hit, but even still, you're right. Yeah, that's actually more likely to happen in an old-fashioned circuit like Melbourne. You should probably see more of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You also saw Albon spin out with understeer. I think he's going to be very hungry for points this year. He was in 6th when he did.
Yeah, he was doing really well on a track that shouldn't have done anything for that car.
Mm-hmm. And gave his competitor Hulkenberg a lot of points, as the Drive to Survive pointed out that there was a lot of competition between the Williams and the Haas at the beginning. I'm intrigued with what happens this year. It's getting really exciting. I remember you saying this to me 15 years ago and I scoffed. And now I have to eat my words in front of you on the record that, man, second to fucking 15th is very exciting in this series right now.
It does get very exciting, yes.
Mm-hmm. You just got to stop. I'm going to tell this is my past, me telling my past self. Stop being such a fucking baby. Stop being miserable just because Schumacher retired and the racing changed. It's still a really good sport. And even though some things changed, it's still really good.
Yes. I'm actually looking forward to the time that Red Bull starts losing sponsorship money.
Ooh.
Because they're not showing their car. Because sponsorship works on you pay more for certain parts of the car that are more visible. Right? Like Oracle is a title sponsor for the Red Bull car, so they get a big Oracle down the side of the side pod. They pay a lot of money for that spot. Mm-hmm. The front wing, the nose cone, certain areas. Like I was listening to another podcast, and they had a quote from Mercedes that said one certain portion of the front wing was worth $10 million a race.
Jesus.
Whether or not that's real, I don't know, but if it is, that's a ton of money, right? McLaren trialed these very thin screens. They're like paper thin LCD screens right next to the drivers on either side of the cockpit so that they could change sponsors, so that they could sell, for example, Android would have 2 laps of sponsorship, and then another company would have another 4 laps of sponsorship, and they would just change the logo on the fly during the race.
When
right?
did they do that? I've never noticed that.
I think it was last year.
Oh, wow.
Last year or 2022. It's really cool, and it drives a lot of innovation. Like, the main thing with those screens and the reason they were trialing them is because they were light enough, right? Because obviously you could put a screen wherever you wanted, realistically, but screens are heavy. So this was a paper thin, flexible screen that only weighed a few grams. So they tried it. They took it off after a couple of races, but sponsorship is about being seen.
So you're saying Red Bull is not being seen enough with their sponsors, or they're not?
How many times did we see Max Verstappen's car in the last 2 races?
That is a great point.
He's out in front. He's out in front by 10, 20 seconds.
It's not
What's
a
the
race.
point of showing him?
Yeah. And Perez is finishing second in a league of his own too.
Right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo fighting over 12th place together in the same team with Magnussen there, and Magnussen holding up 10 cars behind him.
Yeah.
Right? They're focused on that exciting stuff as opposed to the guy running away with it out in front.
Yeah, or even Bierman. Yeah, even like they had a lot of cameras on Bierman throughout the race, or even there was a decent battle between Norris and Hamilton for a while. I know that was 8 and 9th, but it was still pretty good to watch. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, that's well said. So you think this is going to start to affect Red Bull negatively? You're thinking?
I mean, ultimately, these sponsors want to be associated with the winning car, right? Because these cars go places and they're seen by people off track as well. And winning cars do get photographed and they're at the podium celebration. So I don't know that they'll actually lose sponsorship over it, but they may start seeing people be less open to spending ridiculous amounts of money.
That's a good point. I did make that comment. I think it was in the second episode I ever did about Steiner being all proud about getting sponsorship for Haas, and you just said it. Winning is the ultimate sponsorship. All said and done. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get down to brass tacks. We both thinking Max Verstappen wins this weekend? 10 in a row? No DNFs, and like we just talked about, it is still racing. It's still Australia, and last year he got beat to the first corner by Russell, and then I forget someone else passed him too. After a couple laps, he had to fight his way back to first. Incidents can happen, especially if it's Russell.
So let's look at Australia. What kind of track is Melbourne? It's a temporary circuit. It's not a purpose-built circuit.
Hybrid street. Yeah, actually,
so it's in a park, right?
Your excellent therapist episode did get me back onto hybrids because I realize how much I love them. Yeah, and
so in a way, it's similar to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It has areas of significant runoff, so it's not as treacherous as a street circuit is.
Turn 3, but then after turn 1, you have that wall where Kevin Magnussen destroyed his tire last year. There is still some obstacles.
Yeah, there's still walls that are close, but the walls that are close are not necessarily walls you would be very close to per se.
Unless you're Kevin Magnussen.
Sure. But like turn 1's got a mile of runoff. Turn 2 has a lot of runoff.
Turn 3, that's where Alonso and Gutierrez had that big crash years ago.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of crashes happened last year too.
But you've got, where is that? I forget what the turn number is, but where Bottas crashed in qualifying a couple years ago.
Is it towards the end?
No. What the fuck is it? You've got runoff at the beginning of the corner, so you come... It's right after where Leclerc spun off last year.
So it's turn 3. Yeah, turn 3 is the dangerous corner. I'm pretty sure that's what you're thinking of.
Turn 3 is where he spun off.
Yes.
So it's turn 4.
Okay.
So turn 4 when you turn in for turn 4, there's runoff there. But then there's a building in the background and there's a wall that comes off. So if you run slightly too wide, like if you take a proper line through turn 4, you want to run it out wide. But if you go just a hair too far wide, then you get into that wall, and that's what happened to Bottas. So there are areas that are treacherous.
Isn't that what happened to Albon too? Or that was a different turn?
That's a different turn.
Okay. Yeah,
That's right after.
And then a lot of long, great straightaways. Like I said, I was at that Grand Prix. Well, I didn't say that actually. When I was in Australia, I was in Melbourne. I was at the Grand Prix. I stayed down the road. I actually stayed around where Oscar Piastri grew up. I was a 10-minute walk to Albert Park. Beautiful park without the track there. And even, I would say, one of the best Grand Prix. But yeah, a lot of long straightaways with the cages, and it's just the beautiful Melbourne skyline. It's one of the best tracks on the grid. I'm very excited to watch it. And it's at a good time, too. It's not at 1 o'clock anymore. It's at 12, which is very nice. 12 o'clock our time, Eastern time. Really? You didn't know this?
How?
I think we did our daylight savings really early this year. They still haven't done theirs. Because they're still they just went to fall.
No, but we used to have to, I remember staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning to watch that race.
They used to do it a lot later. I think they've toned it back.
So when you say 12, are you talking midnight or noon?
Midnight.
Okay.
Midnight.
So still late, but
Yeah, so it would be 4 o'clock Melbourne time.
PM.
PM. Yes.
So it is late in their day, but
yes. When I was there in 2017, they did it at 5.
which that would put it at a very reasonable time in Europe, which is typically what they try for.
Yes, be 6 p.m. No, 6 a.m. Sorry, 6 a.m. So what am I saying? Yeah, they're not behind us. They're ahead of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
6 p.m. in Alaska or Hawaii. We should move there. We get the ultimate Formula One viewing. Anyways, so we both think Verstappen's going to win.
Well, I'm still trying to figure it out. So it has high-speed areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some tight fiddly bits at the end, but usually those are non-events. Nothing really much happens there.
That last S chicane, you know what I'm talking about. They go that, I think it's turn 15, and then the last turn into the straight line.
Yeah.
Lovely little bit of track there. And a lot of runoff on that turn 15. Right to the pits. You can fuck with people going into the pits. You can think, okay, he's coming. He's going for another lap. Oh, he can turn to the pits pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Realistically, there's no other pick right now.
I would say it's a pretty balanced track, and that's pretty much going to guarantee it's a Max Verstappen win.
Unless they have reliability. 2022, they did have reliability issues. It's hot, and Melbourne can be uncharacteristically hot at times. It can also be uncharacteristically cold at times, too. And that, yeah. It's one of those places where it can be 36 degrees, and then 10 minutes later it starts raining, it's 18.
It's because they're right by the ocean, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's going to be Max and Sergio.
I actually don't think Sergio is not a lock for second, because one thing when I was looking over last year, the Mercedes did really well there. Except for George's DNF. George was leading the race for a while until his
It's a
DNF.
different Mercedes this year.
It's true. And I've been thinking about this all day as well, that Hamilton's checked out. You hear him when he gets upset and when he talks about the car, he's not complaining as much. He's more defeated. The way he talks, he's not sitting here saying all the reasons, all the things they have to do to fix. He's just saying, yeah, it's what it is. We're going to go work on it. Like, you can just sound like he's kind of checked out already. He realizes it's not going to be competitive this year. He might be happy if it is briefly, but I don't think he anticipates as much. And Russell, as we've talked about before, doesn't know what he's really doing. Can't really fix this.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's anything in them, like, remember last year they started off bad too. So they might just still have a good race in Melbourne again. I want to say one of them's on the podium for their first podium of the year, but that might be a stretch. And we will give our top 5 and top 10 predictions and our outliers on the Instagram. So we won't say exactly what we think right now, but...
Why not? Let's work it through.
You want to work it through? Okay. Max is 1 for me. That's the lock.
I got Max and Perez 1, 2.
I want to go with an outlier. I think Russell's going to be hungry. I'm going to put Russell 2.
Okay.
He'll be my Mercedes. Like I said, it's not because I don't think Hamilton can do it. I just think he's just kind of checked out. Doesn't seem to really care. I think Russell's more hungry. So you got Perez 2. Who do you got 3?
That is a tricky one.
We have to also remember, too, I haven't brought it up yet. The McLarens were bad last year. They've improved from this point. So you will definitely see, I think, 2 McLarens in the top 10 this year. Where? I wonder.
Yeah, I don't... They've improved from this point last year. They haven't improved since the end of last year. And that's my concern. You're right. They'll be in the top 10. I don't think they'll be as high as they want to be. I'm going to say Sainz is back. Sainz needs to make up some lost time.
Yes. I was thinking about him. I think he might have well, I guess I shouldn't say that. I see as I think it out with you. I want to say he'll have a slow start back into it, but he started fast in Bahrain. What isn't to say he starts fast again here?
Yeah.
But I'm going to put Perez 3 to be safe. So you're saying Sainz 3.
Yep.
I have Perez 3.
So 4.
Every part of me wants to say Piastri. Home race, a lot to prove. Did good 4th last week. You know what? Let's just do it. Piastri 4th.
All right. I'm going to put Russell.
You're going to put Russell 4th.
I think that is where Russell belongs.
He is a top 5 driver. But that's it. Yes. And literally top 5. Yes. He will never be the champion he thinks he is.
So where are we on 5 now?
Oh. Nico Hulkenberg. No,
I'm going to put it down.
No, don't you dare. That's a tough one for me. I guess like Leclerc, once again, for the same reasons as Russell is kind of hungry. Yeah, let's just do Leclerc.
I'm going to agree with you there.
He's probably going to have a good qualifying too. I bet you he there's a chance he gets pole and still finishes 5th.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't finish 5th if he's not on pole.
That's a good point. Melbourne doesn't really favor. It never has favored the Ferrari, even in the Schumacher age. There was only a couple of years, I think it was 2001 and 2002 when they dominated, that Michael Schumacher won those races. 2003 didn't win. I don't think he won 2004 either.
If I'm remembering correctly, it's historically been pretty good to the McLarens.
Yes. Well, McLaren, Mercedes.
Yes.
So that's why I'm thinking the Mercedes has a leg up here. Yeah, did I miss anybody? Like neither. That's interesting. Neither of us thought Norris anywhere in that top 5.
Well, we have to do P10.
Oh, Sean, you cheeky bastard. P10. He was going to finish 9th last year, so I'm going to put Hulkenberg P10. I'm finally going to pick him for points. I wanted to pick him last week, and I really wish I did. But who did I pick last week? I forget.
Well, let's see. You picked Ricardo.
No. Oops.
Yeah. Well, I picked Stroll.
And he would have if he didn't pull a Lance Stroll.
Fucking Stroll.
Yeah. Another hot take of mine, I'll just say this. Actually, lock it in as my hot take of the week. Aston Martin finishes outside the points, both. I think, because the way my head is going right now, it's two Red Bulls, 2 Ferraris, 2 Mercedes, 2 McLarens, that's 8. And then I'm thinking Alex Albon is somewhere in there. And then I'm thinking Nico Hulkenberg is number 10. So I'm going to lock in no Fernando, who finished on the podium, quote unquote, last year, and no Lance Stroll in the top 10. which is a bold take. I'll admit it.
Yeah, that is. They're not great, but they're not that bad.
I just think they, like, when there's the momentum, they're snowballing backwards.
Yeah.
So I just think the momentum's going the wrong way. Yeah, Fernando did finish 5th. That's the solid 5th place last week. But it took a couple strategy errors, too, from Mercedes and McLaren with Norris and Hamilton. Otherwise, he
I
probably...
don't make mistakes. I make prophecies that immediately turn out to be wrong.
Yes, Murray. Thanks a lot, Gatsby, for outing me like that. Yeah, it's not. I'm not trying to shit on Aston every week. I'm just saying I want to remind people. This is my weekly reminder. Fernando Alonso is not that good, and I'm piecing it together in my mind. My next therapy is going to be all about Fernando Alonso.
Are you up to speed on the latest Fernando gossip?
He's going to Mercedes now, I think, right?
That's what they're claiming.
You said it, and you said it brilliantly right away. You said they would be fucking stupid to do that, but maybe they're desperate.
I mean, why else would Briatore and Toto and Alonso be meeting in a cafe in Monaco?
Unbelievable. Really, Toto? You're smarter than that. He already destroyed the McLaren Mercedes. You really going to let him just do this again on his way out when you didn't want to sign Lewis Hamilton long-term because he was too old. So I have an idea. Let's get a guy who's 2 years older to sign for us.
I'm sorry, but anybody who doesn't have the ability to look at Fernando's career and realize that, one, there's no loyalty there.
No.
He's looking for the best car at the best moment. And it's entirely self-promotion, which, okay, yeah, I get. He's an F1 driver. He needs to put himself in the best position, sure. But his record doesn't hold up.
No.
I mean, yeah, he's been around the longest, sure. He's won a lot of races. Ish.
32, considering a lot of people consider him one of the best of all time. 32 is pathetic.
Right.
With some of the cars he's had.
32 race wins, 2 world championships in 20 years?
Yeah, he hasn't won a championship in 18.
Right. He's got a lot of respect from the paddock, and he is a good driver.
Without loyalty, how does he have that respect? Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, and this is just it. As I look back at it, and as I look into it deeper and deeper as we have these chats, I don't understand why anybody would want him.
No, you're absolutely... Finally, yes. I feel like my screaming at the sky is getting somewhere finally. Like, holy crap. Like, his 2 titles, I said this before a million times, his 2 titles were not authentically great. He sat there and shat on Michael Schumacher in front of Mick, and shame on Mick for not slapping him across the face 2 years ago when he said, Michael's titles were nothing special because he was only fighting his team. That's a terrible impression. I got to work. I can do a good Fernando impression. I didn't dial into it.
I didn't know he was Austrian.
Okay, hold on. The 2 titles, they weren't as good because, Michael was fighting against... fuck, I'm still fucking up. Okay. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is he sat and shat on Michael in front of Mick, saying the 2 titles were nothing special because he was only fighting against his teammate. Your 2 titles were the worst 2 titles, one of the worst 2 titles in history. They had to destroy Michael Schumacher to give you your first one, and you almost lost the second one with a car that was a year and a half ahead of the Ferrari. Michael caught you in a year. Michael caught you in a year. Won more races than you. He would have won the title if the Ferrari engine didn't blow at Japan. How dare you ever say that in front of his kid? And shame on you, Mick. I'm on your team. I'm on your side. I'm rooting for you. But don't you ever let Fernando talk about you. Yes. Gatsby, you asshole. I was making a good point.
I'm sorry, everybody. That was my fault.
It was Gatsby. He doesn't like me.
Getting you onto that rant was my fault.
You're right. Sorry. Anyways, but shame on him. Anyways, you're right. Why? You're right. You said it. You just said it. Why would anyone want him? I don't know. He's now going to be, what, 43 this year? No, 40,
No.
41. 41 he's going to be. 83 or 82. 41 or 42. It makes no sense for a team to have him, especially Mercedes is trying to rebuild. So, yeah, I don't know.
Would you rather them take Antonelli over Fernando?
Wow, that's a great question. Because one is too immature and one is just in arrested development.
Should be taking pension.
Yeah. I would think neither is the right choice, realistically.
But that wasn't the question, Nick.
I know, but if I had to choose one, I guess Antonelli makes more sense long term. And you just develop him, because if the hype's already there and you want him eventually, just take him now. Because Fernando, you know what you're going to get with Fernando, and it's going to be really bad. Gatsby, can you not sit and be a producer for an hour and a half? Anyways.
Move over.
Gatsby. He just got up and left everybody. Why did we hire him?
Because he's the only one that showed up.
Stupid dog. Anyways, what's your hot take of the week?
Well, I still need to pick a top 10.
Oh, you still...
Or, sorry, a P10. I don't know. I want to say an Aston Martin. I want to say specifically Stroll. But after last weekend, he's dead to me.
Yeah, never again.
Single-handedly ruined my fantasy picks last week.
F1philosophypod@gmail.com. Email us and you can join our fantasy league. So far, it's just me, Sean, and Gatsby. Gatsby's crushing. Right now, it hurts. It's hurting both of us. He just keeps picking Max Verstappen and he keeps picking Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and he's just crushing us. Sean and I just keep going out on a limb.
Yeah, we're trying to do it right. He's just picked the statistical winner.
Yeah. Maybe he's not as dumb as we thought he was. Nah, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Yeah. You say that so much about me, it's lost all its meaning. All right, who do you think's 10?
Oh, I'm going to put Fernando.
Fernando.
That's why.
I'm going to work on his impression.
Frankly, I think a P10 is more insulting than out of the points. Because out of the points, you can say, oh, there was contact, or there was this, or he made a mistake. P10 is, you were trying for it.
That's okay. That's a good point. So we're both against Fernando Alonso, and you in a much more Machiavellian way. I like it.
Sure.
I'm going to say he finishes 12th trying. I'm going to be even meaner. But I might be wrong about that. And your hot take of the week?
My hot take of the week. I don't know. Maybe I'm beaten up from the last 2 weeks of life in general, but I don't have anything on the top of my head as a hot take, so let's see.
Okay. How about I get your mind working like this? My second hot take, like I said, I just wanted to be mean to Austin. My original thought was an Alpine gets in the points. Specifically like a ninth. That, like a sneak ninth. They start trending in the right direction. Because last year, this time, Norris got a sixth. It wasn't an authentic sixth. And Piastri got an eighth. And they got a bunch of points that didn't necessarily warrant their performance. Maybe something like that happens to the Alpine.
Well, that just got me thinking about why would that happen. The only way that's going to happen is if we have a bigger clusterfuck than last year.
Could happen.
But then the question is, do we really think there's going to be 3 red flags?
I hope. Okay, you asked that question. I hope not is my answer. Not I know, no. Not that I know from the bottom of my heart the answer is no.
I have my hot take.
What's your hot take?
The race is going to finish under the safety car.
It did last year. And that's another thing I wanted to point out about last year. They tried so hard to get racing going that they fucked it up. It should have just originally ended under safety car and not a second red flag.
Yep.
And then you have completely different dynamics from last year, because then Hulkenberg finishes 9th, not 7th. Haas only has 8 points in the entire season. Think about that. 4 less than Mick Schumacher got fired for. You also have 1 less point for Tsunoda, 4 less points for Piastri, doesn't make much of a difference, but 2 less points for Zhou. 4 points. Does he keep his seat?
Yes.
I guess you're right. I guess there's no other way to put that.
No, I think this year is the first year he's going to have some direct challenge for a seat.
It's not looking good for him. Already crashed in FP3. Didn't get into qualifying. Yeah, he finished 11th, but who cares? In the first race, but who cares?
Yeah, and that's my point. Like, it's still early, and I will continue to say that. But if Zane Maloney keeps up the way he is, I don't think there's any way that they justify Zoe over Maloney.
Yeah, and there's another way to look at it too. And I watched a YouTube video, Law VS. I'm not just saying. I'm just saying this so you know I'm not stealing it. What if Sergio Perez has already done it? Red Bull, they've already made up their mind. Him to Sauber makes a lot of sense. Back to where he started. Still got a lot to give, and they need better direction than Bottas is going to give. And there's a lot of talk now. I'm seeing the articles. They might want to get rid of Bottas too. Bottas is just not doing it. He's not doing what they thought they would do. He would do.
Sure. I don't know that Perez is done yet. Red Bull typically doesn't make these decisions very early. And given the state of Red Bull at the moment, I think it's probably the last thing on their mind.
That's fair, but like I said it before to you, the way Horner's talked, he's talking as if Perez is gone. It's like, I would love to have Daniel in 2025. We have an open seat. He said that the other day. We have an open seat. Really?
They do. He doesn't have a contract, so it is open in 25. That being said, Horner may not make it.
Yeah.
Whatever your personal opinions are on any of what's happening, it's not looking great.
No. It looks like it might actually be at this point one of Horner or Marco. And if either of those pillars go down, because Verstappen says if Marco goes, I'm gone.
Marco's late 70s, maybe 80.
Mm-hmm.
He's day to day as it is in life in general.
That's a good point. Actually, this is a very hot take, and I'm not trying to put it out there. I'm just saying. Him dying would be the best thing for Red Bull. It actually would. It stops the power struggle. It keeps Horner and Verstappen there.
He is 83. He is 80 years old.
Yeah. If he was to drop dead, the power struggle stops. Nobody sides with Jos Verstappen. The only reason Jos Verstappen has a voice right now is because he's hiding behind Helmut Marko. Think about that, right? Like,
and this is just it. Like, with whatever internal power struggle is happening behind the scenes at Red Bull, are they really willing to risk a once-in-a-lifetime talent in their car?
no. But that goes to your point that maybe Horner won't make it.
Right.
Yeah. So, shit.
Like, you can argue that Horner is responsible for all of the success at Red Bull, the championships with Vettel, the rebuilding of the team afterwards and everything else, and getting them to where they are today. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you have to win races.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that's winning the races, you put anybody else in that seat and they're not that dominant.
No. And Lando figured that out. That's why he didn't take the contract they allegedly offered him. I think Albon knows he can't really go back there. I think Sainz knows he can't go back there. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Like,
yeah. And that's the tricky part, because despite what has happened and where Horner sits today and everything else, he has been a leader that's gotten them there. He might be a fucking idiot.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't deny that he is responsible for the success.
No, not at all. And that's why I said to you last week, it's a trifecta.
Yeah.
They need all three, realistically.
Yeah.
If they could find someone Horner-like, that would be the best option, I think, for all this, too. But who is like him?
I mean, The next in line for that role is Jonathan Wheatley, and he seems to be perfectly capable and a well-rounded person, but he's unproven.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean you have Horner's attitude. Think of all the fighting and maneuvering of the media Horner did during 2021. Is Jonathan Wheatley going to do that? Probably not.
I don't know. I mean, we can sit here and speculate all we want. At the end of the day, doesn't really matter. We'll find out eventually what happens.
Yeah.
But things have ramped up in the last couple of days, so we'll see how long this goes on for.
Maybe if they don't, I imagine the timeline in Red Bull's head is end of April at the end of the Asian part of the, like Japan and China. If they
It's out of their hands now.
That's right, because of the FIA investigation, the complaint by the girl. Poor thing.
She got damn near £1 million for it, but
but by the sound of it, I said it to you before, it didn't sound like she really wanted to bring this to light.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why I feel bad for her.
And again, I will just keep a little bit of this open because we haven't seen any of the evidence and we haven't seen any investigation other than the files that were sent out. So we don't know if those were real or not.
Mm-hmm.
But based on what we've seen, it looks like this is legitimate. But we have to let this play out in the long run, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's real, absolutely, she deserves everything that is available to her to get justice. And frankly, the way things have been going, it doesn't look good for Red Bull or Christian Horner.
No. You have Ginger Spice at home, man. Did you really need some strange? There, I said it. She still looks good, too. She's what, in her mid-40s now?
Mm-hmm.
No, and the other Spice Girls didn't age that well. Posh Spice, I'm looking at you. And Black's not supposed to crack. Scary Spice, it's not looking good either.
She's 51.
Jerry Halliwell's 51. And she doesn't look like she has that much work on her face. That's pretty impressive. Good job.
Yeah, but she's not always around. And he spends a lot of time out there, right?
But she is around. She wants to be on Drive to Survive.
Sure.
Blatantly. And like obviously, and they cut to her so many times.
But they've also got a bunch of kids, and
That's right, yeah.
so it's just one of these things where stupid people make stupid decisions. So
At least it's not I don't know if you've been following the wrestling controversy with Vince McMahon. At least he's not doing that. Have you been following that?
I've heard about it, but I'm not following it.
Good God, yeah. I won't mention it here, but good Lord. Get back to Jesus Christ, everybody. Don't do the sick, perverse things you do. And on that note, I think, I'm excited for the race, and we'll be back to talk about what we saw, what we think about it. This is a good discussion today. We should send this to the FIA, our solutions for the juniors.
We should, and they will be very promptly ignored.
Exactly, yeah. They may even sue us or send a hitman out there because they can't let this get out into the ether. Right?
Yes.
All right. So if you don't hear from me and Sean, you know what happened. I want to be alive. I don't want to kill myself. This didn't work for Jeffrey Epstein, but hey, I'm trying it anyways.
I might kill him, but yeah. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, Sean's number one suspect if I die. Okay. Formula One Philosophy on Instagram. F1philosophypod@gmail.com for the fantasy league.
F1_philosophy on Instagram.
F1_philosophy, my mistake. F1 Philosophy, no underscore at YouTube. Please like and subscribe our videos. You'll see more of us, more content out there. And as always, Unibrew, please sponsor this podcast. We drink your beer anyways. You might as well sponsor us.
Even if you just send beer.
You just send us beer. That's all we want. Anyways, good night, everybody.
Gatsby, you have anything to close us off with?
Like a buried up a drain pipe.
I swear to God, I'm going to fire you one of these days, Gatsby. You goddamn dog.
I mean, he's, what's the term I'm looking for?
Special?
No.
It's low?
He's not a diversity hire. He's a,
Inclusivity hire?
yeah.
I got a story to tell you after the podcast. Do you want me to tell it on the podcast? It's pretty bad.
No, it's probably best if you don't.
Well, I have to tell Sean a story now. So good night, everybody.
Good night.